really what I wanted to sort of talk to you about this afternoon was my study that I did for my Nuffield Scholarship that was kindly sponsored by the British Egg Marketing Board Trust. And what I do for Embryo, which is a global animal health company that manufactures vaccines and animal medicines, is that I head up the avian business, and I spend a lot of time on farms in the UK and Ireland. I'm very lucky because I get to see lots of different integrations, and I spend a lot of time looking at vaccinations, so things like eye dropping some 16-week-old pullets, and they will go on to be the egg-laying birds. I also be looking at vaccinating meat birds. At the bottom, there's 30,000 birds in the house, and you've got to vaccinate them on one morning. So how do you do it? This vaccine goes through the drinking water. I'm also involved in hatcheries, and one of the things that we do is spray day-old chicks with vaccines, and they'll take that up through the oral system, through the eye, the Harderian glands, they'll preen it off each other. So through my job, I became a sponsor for the 2009 Nuffield Poultry Study Groups tour to France. And I was really lucky because I helped organise a couple of farm visits. And when I was on that trip, I met an awful lot of interesting people in the UK Nuffield Poultry Group. And I learned an awful lot from them. And really, that's how my sort of education with Nuffield started. Is that by applying to do a scholarship, I would continue my education, but then after that, we're talking about giving back to the UK poultry industry the things that I've learned. So as a vet, I'm very interested in disease prevention, but one of the things, it's the most important factor that will influence the economic outcome of a flock's performance is chick quality. And when we're talking about chick quality, we want it so a good, mature chick that has the ability to maximise the genetic potential that it's got. And what you want is uniform chicks. So these uniform flocks are easier to manage. You've not got two different types or even three different populations of birds within a house. They're easier to manage. They'll actually feed convert better. You can manage the drinker lines better because you've got birds at the same sort of heights. And really, uniformity is the key to the game in the UK, is you want to be able to produce a uniform meat bird for your supermarket contracts, or uniform pullets that will actually go on to be the same body weight. You stimulate them with light, and they will then all come in to lay together, again, for your supermarket contracts. One of the problems we have in the UK is that chick quality varies tremendously. And I want to know why. And one of the reasons is the health and the management of the parent breeder flocks. If we have a disease problem in those flocks, you lose a flock, then the number of hatching eggs available can be changed. Or it may well be an economic situation, such as the consumer in the UK may have bought an organic bird for a Sunday roast, has then dropped down to a free-range bird, which may now have dropped down to a standard bird. So it changes all the time. And there's a number of hatching eggs available. If you've got few eggs available, you'll be hatching from young breeder flocks or older breeder flocks you've kept on. You might even hatch eggs that have been laid on the floor, so they're not clean, and you're taking dirt into a hatchery. How you incubate an embryo affects the chick that hatches out of that egg, and the management of the young chick is also very important. This baby chick, it can't control its own body temperature. Its immune system is very, very immature, and its gut system is immature. It needs to feed, to get food inside its gut to actually stimulate that gut to mature, which means then you're on to converting feed efficiently and growing. So where did I go? I went to a couple of countries where the economic climate is similar to ours in the UK. Labour's expensive. Automation is essential to get around the problems that we have. So I looked at the US and the Netherlands, but also I wanted to look at countries where, when the rest of the world was going into economic recession, their economy kept growing. And when you've got a massive population with an economy that's improving, then the diet needs to improve for those people. And poultry protein is essential in those improving countries. So I went to China and India to have a look at their poultry production, of how they produced a good quality chick. I'm going to touch on a few little things I looked at in my studies, and one of the main things I looked at was incubation. When you have those eggs and put them into an incubator, how you treat those eggs, the environment they're in, the temperature, the humidity, will affect the quality of the chick that comes out. And temperature is very important. In the second half of incubation, a chicken's egg is incubated for 21 days. In the second half, if the temperature of that embryo is too high, then those chicks will hatch out early. They're going to be smaller, they're going to be more immature, they don't take the yolk sac back in, and that's what feeds the embryo as it's growing, and also feed when the chicken hatches out. But not only are you having just a smaller chick, the actual relative body weights are lower, and the organs. So if you've got a heart that could be 22% smaller than it should be, then you're running into problems of ascites, you can have heart attacks and sudden deaths later on in the flock. There's a little organ called the bursa fabricius, which is inside the chicken, just by the tail, and that organ is responsible for producing B cells, which is where the bursa bit is, and those B cells, the antibodies, is part of your immune system for fighting disease. And also, if you're going to give vaccines to any animal, you need the antibodies to be produced to respond to those vaccines, which gives you protection later on in life. So if you've not incubated these chicks properly, then that bursa is much reduced, and your ability for the immune system for that bird is going to be affected for the rest of its life. I looked at in ovo delivery systems. This is quite exciting technology where at 18 days of incubation, a little hole is punched in the shell of the egg, a needle can go in, and you can deliver vaccine. You can also deliver antibiotics, which a lot of that was done in the States. But the name of the game is not to inject a chick. You actually inject into the fluids, the amniotic fluid in which that chick grows in. You put the vaccine or the antibiotic in there, and then in the last 3 days of incubation, as that chick grows and develops, it's actually going to be breathing in the fluids, ingesting those fluids, and that's where it takes up the vaccine or the antibiotic. And what happens is that you then hatch out chicks already vaccinated. Your chick processing time on the day of the hatch is much reduced, and you can get those chicks out to the farm. We're sort of used to the in ovo system for delivering vaccines, but I visited the University of Georgia to their Poultry Diagnostic and Research Centre, and I met a very interesting lady, Dr. Margie Lee, and her work was looking at giving probiotics in ovo to embryonated eggs. We're sort of used to the fact now that when chicks hatch out, they're not little sterile beings that pick up bugs from the environment. With disease, we know that there is transmission from a parent bird through the egg and the embryo to that little chick that hatches out. We've long known that a vertical transmission from parent flocks to progeny happens. But why not try and give good bacteria while that embryo is still inside that egg? It hatches out with a good colony of good bacteria in its gut, which then is there to try and inhibit the bad bacteria getting in. And the problems that we have all over the world is Campylobacter and Salmonella in our poultry. If we got good bacteria in there, keeping the bad bacteria out, this might go a long way to solving these two zoonotic disease problems for the human health in the UK. I've talked a little bit about embryos. One of the other things that I looked at as well was managing that baby chick. The chick that can't control its own body temperature, has an immature gut, has an immature immune system. And in the Netherlands at the Unibrood hatchery, it's a unique hatchery in the fact they hatch the embryos, and the chicks come out of the eggs, but then they brood them in the hatchery for 4 days before transfer to farm. So they're having all the feed, sometimes they'll have probiotics, they'll have all the water and everything that they need in a very positive environment, making sure they're a little bit more mature before they go out onto the farm. Sometimes they actually hatch out from small eggs, even smaller than 45, down to 40 grams. And that also means if we're in that situation where we don't have enough eggs for the market, for actually hatching out into chickens, then what you can do is hatch them from these younger breeder flocks with these smaller eggs. The Netherlands also had a different idea about this as well. And instead of hatching eggs out in a hatchery and keeping them in the hatchery, let's do it the other way around. Let's hatch out eggs on a farm and keep them directly on that farm. And what they do is that they move the eggs at 18 days of incubation. So then they've got 3 days on the farm, and they're actually, I don't know how good the pictures you can see, they're in the little trays. They hatch out, they fall about 45 centimetres directly onto the litter, immediate access to feed and water, so no dehydration while you're actually transporting a chick from a hatchery to a farm. Then you've actually got immediate access to water, and this could actually cut the time from hatching to slaughter by 1 day, which again gives you economic improvements. So after my study, I feel I've got a greater understanding of the issues that influence the chick's ability to resist disease. I feel more confident in dealing with hatchery issues in the UK. I've made some great contacts in the poultry industry, which is truly global industry. And what's more, as I feel like now, let's continue my education with the Nuffield Poultry Group. So I'd like to say thank you to the UK Nuffield Poultry Group, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today. I'd like to thank my sponsors, British Egg Marketing Board Trust, because that is the key, is in the title, the Egg Marketing Board Trust, and they let me look at the meat birds as well as the layers, which is good of them. Merial gave me the time to travel, and some of my Merial colleagues were great in helping me in China to get onto farms that normally closed to outsiders. My husband Steve, for his encouragement and support, and really thank you to Nuffield, because I've had a fantastic time, I've learned loads, and I want to continue learning and enjoying this adventure in the future. Thank you.